Okay, hi everyone. My name is Torsten Gohl and I'm the Executive Director for Table Tennis North. My gender pronouns are he and him, and in the spirit of reconciliation, Table Tennis North acknowledges that we live, work, and play with many traditional territories. Our physical office and training center is situated on the sacred lands of the Dega Gutier, also known as the home of the river people, in Treaty 11 territory. And today I'm on the beautiful Mackenzie River right now. I have Tsiki Check next to me, and we have the amazing Rachelle talking a little bit about nutrition today. So I'm just going to hand it over right away. So thanks for everybody for being here and enjoy the workshop.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. It's nice to connect with you all again. So today we are going to do a nice cooking workshop. So I also did incorporate some review from the past seminar we had. I did initially plan to do it at the beginning. So actually, I'm just going to save it till the end just to make sure we have adequate time to go into some more stuff about meal prep and just cooking at home. So before I get started, I'll just share my screen here. Oh, Thorsten, would you be able to allow me to share my screen?
You should be able to share it now.
Oh, there we go. Now it's working. Perfect. All right, and share. Perfect. Yeah, so today it's all about nutrition for athletes. So we're going to apply that nutrition knowledge through an interactive workshop. So everything that we touched on last time. And if you are coming to this without watching that first one, I highly recommend you watch that first seminar here. So before I get started, just a quick introduction and land acknowledgement. So if you didn't watch the first one, my name is Rachelle. I am a UBC Vancouver graduate and I graduated in dietetics. So I am a registered dietitian based in Vancouver, and I'm currently continuing my studies through the IOC Sports Diploma just to further enhance my sports nutrition knowledge. Before I get started, I want to just acknowledge that I am fortunate to be able to present on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. So like I mentioned, this is a quick overview of what we're going to be discussing today. However, I am going to kind of skip over the review and save that to the end, just in case we have adequate time, and then you can have your snacks maybe as we go through. So I'm going to skip all those and just dive into meal and snack preparation. So we're going to talk about batch cooking and what is it, types of food and recipes that you can batch cook, as well as we're going to apply that balanced plate model that we discussed in that first seminar in terms of batch cooking. Then we're going to go from that whole foods into more cooking with supplements. So before we dive into how to cook with supplements and how we can incorporate them into different meals and snacks, I'm going to touch on just the types of supplements that you want to incorporate and when maybe a supplement is indicated. And then we're going to dive into the cooking demonstration. So we're cooking two different meals and snacks today. The first one is a poke bowl, and it's quite versatile. You can really choose any type of ingredients to incorporate, which I'll touch on when we get into it. And then the second one is actually incorporating that protein supplement. So this is more of like a nice snack to have on hand, whether you want to grab something pre or post workout or have during a competition weekend. So I'm just going to skip over our review and start off with our meal and snack preparation discussion. So meal prep. So that is batch cooking most of the time. So batch cooking means you're making a lot of specific foods all at once and then storing it for later use. So this can mean a couple things for different people. So the first thing is you could prepare 4+ servings of different recipes. So whether you grab a big chili recipe, a big stew recipe, and you make one single recipe that you eat consistently for multiple servings. So that way you can throw it in the freezer, grab and go, de-thaw it whenever you'd like. But the second one is something that I utilize a lot more often, and it's actually preparing single food components to be used in a later on recipe. So what does that mean? So that could be cooking a bunch of rice, so that carbohydrate component of our meal, and make maybe up to 6-8 servings of that, and then just storing that in the fridge. So later on, when you make a meal, you can just grab the rice instead of having to wait for that to cook. So you can also do this with vegetables and all of the different sorts, which I'll touch on in the next slide here. So first, talking about that first concept. So different recipes that work really well with batch cooking are things like soups, like I mentioned. You could make minestrone soup, you can make chili. Other things that freeze really well is curries. So you can make that sauce to the curry, maybe incorporating the protein in with that nice marinade. And then later on, you can de-thaw it and then pour that over rice with some vegetables. Another one is lasagna. That's a really great one to throw in the freezer, or things like bolognese sauce, casseroles, or even burritos. You can make a bunch of burritos, wrap them all up, and then freeze them. And then they're kind of like a homemade microwave burrito, which is super fun. We're not making that today, but I will definitely want to do that in the future. All right. And then that second concept that I was talking about is preparing those single foods. So in terms of carbohydrates, not all starchy carbohydrates need to be prepared beforehand. So especially those with a shorter cooking time. So the carbohydrates that we may want to prep in advance are things like rice. So that could be brown or white rice. So cooking a bunch and throwing it in the fridge for later use, just because depending on the type of grain, that can take from 20 minutes to up to an hour, depending if you're cooking like a white or a whole grain rice. And that just saves so much extra time if you already have some on hand. Another thing is potatoes. So you can bake a bunch of potatoes all at once, store them in the fridge. So later on, when you want to use them in a meal, all you really need to do is chop them up, heat them up, and they're good to go. Quinoa is one that can go either way. It takes roughly 15 minutes to cook. However, like the rice, if you make a bunch all at once, it's really easy to just grab and go rather than having to wait that extra 15 minutes every time you incorporate quinoa. Another one, again, because these ones are more whole grains, are good to cook in advance. So things like steel cut oats, that can take a longer time to prepare. Or even things like overnight oats. This is something that I love to recommend athletes that they meal prep, especially if they're preparing for a competition weekend. Overnight oats can be well for like a breakfast or even a mid-snack idea. And that just allows those oats to sit in that liquid for a long period of time. And therefore, they're really delicious to eat later on. And then the last one, you can also prep baked goods. So this could go for protein pancakes or muffins. These are really, really great to make in advance. So then you just have to pop them in the microwave to heat them up, or a toaster to heat them up. And you have a really great source of some carbohydrate, and depending on the composition of it, even a nice protein-rich snack. So the other ones that I'm talking about not having to prepare as much, those would be things like pasta. Like pasta only takes roughly around 5 to 8 minutes to cook on the stovetop there. But with pasta, it also doesn't sit very well in the fridge. So I recommend you make that one fresh. Other things obviously are like breads and wraps. There's not much preparation to those, so you don't need to do that as much. Cereals, quick cooking oatmeal. So that takes roughly 2 minutes to cook up, or canned carbohydrates. So things like canned corn, that doesn't need as much preparation. Then when it comes to preparing single foods in proteins, I think that this one's great to prepare on hand, especially with athletes that struggle to get enough protein. If you don't have it on hand and you have to cook it in advance, sometimes it can be difficult for that athlete to even want to do that in the first place, and therefore maybe struggle with incorporating protein in their diet. So you're going to benefit from this. And honestly, it can be quite minimal preparation in terms of preparing your proteins. So the ones that I'm thinking of that require prep are things like meats, fish, as well as eggs. You can pre-hard boil eggs, or you could even make little egg bakes like in little cups to have on hand to go. Other things are like tofu, tempeh, seitan. So those are those plant-based products that I recommend you prep in advance, as well as dried legumes. Because dried legumes, similar to a whole grain, you need to cook them, so they take a little bit longer time. Therefore, I would recommend you prep them in advance. However, nice, easy, and convenient proteins that don't require prep are things like nuts and seeds, because all you need to do is scoop them out of their jar and eat them right as is. Another one is canned legumes. And one that I actually forgot to mention on my slide here is actually canned fish. So like canned salmon, canned tuna, those ones are also really great, good to go proteins that require minimal preparation, as well as dairy products. That can be a very easy way to get in some protein. So things like Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or milk or even soy milk. Those are some nice protein options that you can just, again, consume right as is. And then the last one that I want to touch on in single food items to meal prep are vegetables and fruits. So this can be, again, done in many different ways. So you can prepare either a large salad. So whether you're going to make one single thing, one thing that I recently had done is create like a Mexican style salad with some black beans, corn, chopped veggies like red onions, cucumbers, peppers, and put a dressing in there. And it actually sits really well and absorbs more flavor as time goes on. So the benefit to prepping a nice large salad that sits well is you can incorporate that in so many different ways into your diet, and it really helps increase that fruit and vegetable servings. So one way with my corn salad is I can throw that into some tacos, or I can throw that into a rice bowl, or I can throw that into a quesadilla, or just have it on the side with my carbohydrate and my protein. So there's lots of different ways you can incorporate vegetables through having that large salad on hand. Another way is just pre-chopping vegetables. So cutting things like carrots, peppers, cucumbers, and just storing them in containers singly. You can either create like wedges, which are great for snacking, or you can cut them and dice them so they're easily just thrown into different recipes where you need to pre-chop lots of vegetables. So I didn't do that today for our cooking workshop because I wanted to work through every single ingredient with you. But for this poke bowl that we're going to be making, if you're using carrots, it would be really great if you had a bunch of prepped grated carrots in your fridge ready to go to just throw in instead of every time having to grate the carrot. So it's just all about being efficient with your time. Another thing too is just considering that you can pre-cook vegetables. So this doesn't go for all vegetables, as some sit in the fridge cooked better than others. So ones that I would recommend are things like more hearty vegetables. So things like Brussels sprouts, or maybe baked cauliflower or baked broccoli. Sometimes those would sit better than, say, if you pre-cooked spinach. And also pre-cooking those other vegetables take minimal time. And then I had a couple other ideas, especially when it comes to fruits. One thing that I can recommend to some people is just freezer bag smoothie packs. So you can either take little reusable containers or reusable sealable bags. And if you have a favorite smoothie that requires a couple different fruits and vegetables, what you can do is actually get a bunch of those reusable packs, throw in half a banana, throw in a handful of berries, and throw in a handful of spinach. You could even throw in some seeds, zip it up. And then that way, all you have to do is dump that into a blender, add some milk, blend it up, and it's good to go. And then, another thing which is more so about just making sure we reduce our food waste is if you do have any fruits or vegetables that are going bad, a great way to meal prep them and make sure we don't put them to waste is just freezing them, and they can go great in smoothies. Like for instance, if you have some overripe bananas and you don't want them to go to waste, you can freeze them and then they'll be great in a smoothie or any baked goods later on. Okay, and before we get into the cooking demonstration, I just wanted to touch on the balance plates model. So remember, just that very first one is that easy training day or that rest day. And this is based off of that Canada Food Guide model. So we're aiming for half of our plate to be from fruits and vegetables, a quarter from those starchy carbohydrates, and a quarter from those proteins. And then as you can see, when we move on to that moderate training, we're increasing that carbohydrate because the level of effort and energy that we're putting out is a lot more. So we actually increase that carbohydrate serving, that starchy carbohydrate, from a quarter plate to a full third plate, therefore decreasing the vegetables just slightly. And notice that protein stays consistent at that quarter plate. And then when we move on to that hard training, you can really notice now that those carbohydrates are a really big component of our plate. So because again, we're expending way more energy than normal, we want to utilize carbohydrates as energy. So they go from that first plate, a quarter, all the way to doubling it up to half of our plate. That protein stays consistent and that fruit and vegetable portion decreases slightly. So we're going to kind of touch on this as we build our poke bowl, just because there's many different ways you can build it. It all depends on the kind of training day you have, and just what that looks like on how much rice or how much vegetables you're going to be incorporating into your meal. Okay, so that was all talking about the whole foods and the meal prep with whole foods. The second part is protein supplements. So protein supplements are categorized as a sport food supplement. There's lots of different supplements on the market, but this one, for instance, can provide a convenient source of protein when it's more impractical to consume those whole foods. So I always like to recommend, if you can, try to have whole foods as much as possible. But of course, if you're in a time pinch, if you need something more convenient and easy, protein supplements can be a great way to help you reach your protein needs. So with that being said, when choosing a protein powder, it's very important to make sure that it is NSF certified for sport. And I included the link in the presentation there, as well as it can be informed choice or LGC tested. So these different platforms, they allow us to explore all of the different supplements that are free from doping. So it doesn't have any maybe harmful substances that might be flagged if we do get tested for any drug tests. So I'll show you what those look like. So I took a couple screenshots from the websites here. So NSF certified for sport, you can see that it allows you to type in kind of like the name brand or the type of supplement that you're searching for, as well as different product types or like any specific goals that you're wanting from the supplement. And then once you browse, it will give you a long list of different supplements that are approved. So I would recommend to stick to these lists. So as you can see on the right, there's just a bunch of different ones, but there were so many different types. So you can just explore, see what ones are maybe most cost effective or the ones that are more accessible to you. Same thing for the next one, it's informed choice. So similar to the very first one, it allows you to just search by brand, product type, or batch ID. You just search that up, and again, it'll pop up with a bunch of different brands of protein powders or any type of supplement that you're searching for that is going to be approved. So I just put those couple examples there just to let you know maybe what ones are approved and maybe those ones are in your area. Great ones are Vega, that one is all certified, Garden of Life, Sun Warrior, but again, there's so many different types here. So when it comes to cooking using protein powders, there's a couple different ways you can do it. So one of the easiest ways to incorporate protein powder in your diet is through a protein shake. That can be either a smoothie or just shaken up with some water or some milk. If you do want to blend it into smoothies, really great flavors are chocolate banana, peanut butter and berry, mango pineapple, or even a green smoothie. I really do like the smoothie option too, especially for those struggling to get enough fruits and vegetables in their day, as it can be a nice, easy way to just sneak those extra servings in by blending it into your smoothie. One downside to this, however, is that you do need a blender on hand, and it actually may not be the best option to pack on the go. And that's just because it typically needs refrigeration, and sometimes depending how long it sits, it doesn't sit too well. A lot of things like settle to the bottom and just need to reshake it, so it may not be as appetizing. So this one I also wanted to share because I think that this one is a little bit less known, but you can actually incorporate unflavored protein powders into more savory items. This would be more recommended to people who are more plant-based or vegan or vegetarian, just because sometimes some people have more struggles getting their protein intake on that type of diet. But what you can do with this one is you can incorporate it into things like pureed soups by just blending it in. You can barely even taste the difference because it's unflavored, but it boosts that protein content. Another great way is mashing it into mashed potatoes or mixing it into a spread. Like you can mash it into guacamole or hummus or anything like that to spread on top of toast. One note that I did want to make, however, is the different protein powders are going to be a little bit different in texture and flavor than others, depending on the composition. So whether it's going to be milk-based or plant-based may yield a different result. And the last way that I like to incorporate protein powder, which we're going to actually be doing today, is making a fun, tasty snack. So I love a good sweet. So I always like to make it like a nice little sweet protein treat. And that's just baked or no baked items. So you can do this in so many different ways. Like I mentioned before, you can throw it into overnight oatmeal. You can make energy balls, which we're going to be doing today, or maybe homemade protein bars. You can make things like protein pudding. So whether you kind of incorporate that into like a chia pudding or something of the sort, or protein brownies or protein pancakes, any of those sorts of things are a nice, easy way to bake in our protein powder into something that we can grab on the go. That just sits a lot better in our bags than, say, a nice fresh smoothie. All right, so that brings us to cooking. So today we are making two different recipes. I've mentioned them already. That first one is going to be that poke bowl, and the second one is going to be that nice sweet energy bite. So before we get started, does anyone have a specific one that they want to start with?
Hey, Rachelle, I think there was a question here from Shauna.
Oh yeah, let's see. Do you have a tried and true overnight oats recipe? Yes, I do. And I would be happy to share that with you after the seminar. I will make sure I'll email that to Thorsten. And then Thorsten, are you able to share that with the group?
Yes, 100%.
Perfect. Yes, I have lots of different recipes, so I'll definitely share that with you. Yeah, because sometimes with overnight oatmeal, especially if you're incorporating things that soak up water, so things like flax seeds or chia seeds or anything of the sort, it's really important to get those ratios on point, because when you're preparing it, you might find that it's really runny, but as it's sitting for hours, it'll start absorbing the water and then becoming a lot more thicker overnight. Okay, perfect. So we will dive into the recipes. Did anyone have a preference? Shona, do you have a preference on what one we start with? Anyone? Thorsten?
No preference on my side.
No preference. Okay, great. How about let's start off with the poke bowl. And I apologize in advance because I'm taking you to my very small kitchen. So I really hope the filming is going to be okay. And like I shared a bunch of the different recipes, there are so many different things that you can use. So what I use today, I will voice up that you can substitute for many different options. This also depends on the type of cooking equipment you have and all of that sort of thing. So that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to take you to my kitchen here. We're going to start off with that poke bowl. I'll show you all of my different ingredients here. All right. So I'm going to set you up right there. Hopefully you can kind of see a little bit. We good? Okay, so for my poke bowl, we want to start off by thinking about our carbohydrate. So what I actually did last night is I have a rice cooker, and I really recommend getting a rice cooker on hand. I got mine from a thrift store for $5, super cheap. And so what I did is I prepared a bunch of rice. So I just kept this in my fridge. As you can see, I already had a little bit. So this way I have rice on hand. It is cold, so I'm going to microwave it to get it warmed up, but it's really nice to just have this on the go. So again, I'm using white rice. You can use brown rice, you can use quinoa, you can use any sort of whole grain for this poke bowl. I even mentioned you can use a thing called rice noodles. And those ones actually don't need any preparation in advance because you can just soak those in hot water for around 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how you like the texture. But yes, this is what I'm using for my base for the carbohydrate. And then now you want to start considering what athlete plate are we going to be building. So are we on a rest day? Are we on a moderate training day? Are we on a hard training day, right? That's going to really depend on how much rice we're putting into our plate here. So I'm actually going to grab my plate out so I can show you. For instance, I'm going to be training today, so mine's a moderate training day. So that means I'm going to have roughly a third of my plate coming from carbohydrates here. So roughly that. So just going to grab my fork. And if anyone has questions throughout, please just either unmute yourself or ask them in the chat box, and I'm sure the rest of them will let me know. So what I do is I just put that into my plate here. As you can see, it's quite rock hard. I tried my best to do a nice third plate. Again, it's super rough. And all you have to do here is you can either place an ice cube on it, or what I just do is a little bit of water, and then I stick it in my microwave for about a minute to a minute and a half. So I'm just going to do that. Hopefully the sound isn't too loud. All right. So while that's microwaving, I'll kind of walk you through the other ingredients that I have here. So the next component of this bowl is going to be protein. So the thing that I'm using for protein today is tofu. So I have a firm tofu with me, and I'm going to be using either, like, I have an air fryer with me, but because maybe everyone has something different, I'll also use my pan there. But again, everyone's protein source is going to be a little bit different, so you're going to prepare it differently. If you're using canned salmon or canned tuna, you're so lucky. You just have to open up the can and dump it in. That's all you have to do for that preparation. In terms of like chicken or shrimp or egg, everything has a slightly different preparation time. So one thing that you can do for really easy guidance is just Google search it. Say how to cook chicken breast or how to cook shrimp, something nice and easy. Typically, our stovetop here is going to be one of the best ways to cook a protein. It'll be nice and fast. Or if you're doing a huge batch cook, like I was mentioning, just having a bunch of like chicken breasts or anything on a parchment paper and then baking that in the oven, you store that in the fridge and it's easy to grab and go. Because I didn't do that today, I'm gonna show you how I prepare my tofu. And if you're unfamiliar with cooking tofu, then this is great. I'm gonna teach you how I do it. It's super fast. And then one thing that I really wish I had, but I don't have it today, which is a great protein booster, is called edamame. You can buy this frozen, and it's just, again, another great way to boost your protein. Just half a cup can take you up to about 10 more grams of protein there. Okay, so my rice is now microwaved. As you can see, it's kind of steaming there. So all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna press it nice and flat and create a nice base there and just set it aside for now. Okay. So that's my protein source. I'll show you how I cook that in a second. And then for my vegetables today, I have a massive bag of spinach. I'm gonna make a little homemade gourmet version. Takes a couple minutes, super fast. I have a nice cucumber. I have some green onions. I have a carrot. And for a little bit of sweetness, I just have a mango. They were on sale here, but again, you can choose like pineapple, or you can just completely omit the fruit as well. Other things that I mentioned too is just maybe corn, or having red cabbage or radish, any sort of nice fresh vegetable there. And I think that's all. I have a lot of other flavors that I'm going to incorporate, but let's start off by cooking that tofu. So if you're new to cooking tofu or you're not cooking tofu, no worries. You can always cook something different. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to press it because it does contain lots of liquid. So you can take either a towel or a paper towel, and I just wrap mine up and squeeze that out. So when it comes to the amount of protein, like I talked about in the previous one and those balanced plate models, we want to aim for a fourth of our plate. You can also take a quick peek at that nutrition label on your packaging for the protein. And again, I think I mentioned the specific amounts in the last one, but we want to aim for maybe around 20 to 30 grams of protein for the full meal. I know that this is a 2/3 of a block. I'm going to use a full third because that will be sufficient amount of protein for myself here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop off my serving size. And again, I'm only making one serving, but you can batch cook it, make a bunch, and store it in the fridge. I'm going to slice it into cubes. And the thing that I love about tofu too is it's just so cost effective. It's quite cheap where I am, but that may depend of where you are. And it's also really easy to make. So I have a container. This is just an empty, clean container. Now that I chopped up my tofu, and I'm pretty sure you can do this with any sort of protein, like this may also work with chicken, but what I do is I just put it into my container here. Okay, separate all of the different pieces. And I'm going to take cornstarch. Okay, this is just going to make it a little bit more crispy. But again, this is optional. And I just sprinkle it in roughly, put my lid on, and I give it a good shake. And that just covers all of the tofu. So I'm gonna pop mine into my air fryer, but if you're using a pan, what you can do is just heat that up on medium high, put some oil in there, and then you're just gonna throw the tofu on the pan and just crisp it up until it gets nice and golden brown. Just because my air fryer is right here and it's so easy, and I'll walk you through other things, that's what I'm gonna choose today. So as you can see, the slight liquid of the tofu allowed that cornstarch to stick really nicely all around the tofu here. And it's going to yield a nice and crispy texture. So I'm just going to dump that in. And then I air fry mine for around 6 to 7 minutes. If you are using the pan here, that would probably be roughly the same amount of time, just making sure that you flip it all around as it's cooking. And let me know if the sound of my air fryer is too loud and you can't hear me, but I have quite a loud voice, so hopefully that's not going to be a problem. Okay, and so now that that is cooking, and say if you didn't even prep your carbohydrate or your rice yet, I would have done that at the very beginning. Depending on the rice, it may just take 20 minutes, or quinoa may take 15 minutes. So as you're preparing all of your other foods, that will just continue to cook. So like I said, I have cucumber. So what I like to do is just take off a little bit, and then I like to dice this one. You can play around with the sizes. I like to keep mine quite small here. So make sure also I did wash my hands before I'm cooking, cooking with clean hands, using the correct knives. So here I just have a small paring knife, and that's because I'm chopping small things. You don't need to grab a huge chef's knife here at all. Okay. And the nice thing about this one too is you can really choose the types of vegetables you like most. If you're not a huge vegetable eater, just choose those very neutral tasting ones. Like I think cucumber is a great way to not only add a little bit of nutrients, but also a little bit of extra hydration without feeling like you're eating, broccoli, maybe not be a fan favorite. So I chopped that, super easy, all done. Next, I have a carrot. So you can either grate your carrot, or I have this little handy, can't remember, I don't know if it's like a julienne, or you can get like a vegetable peeler, and this is just gonna make nice strips. So what I do is I set it down on my cutting board, and I just lightly go over my carrot here. And again, this would be a nice thing to prep ahead of time, just because, getting all these little small slices of carrot can be quite tedious for some. So if it is, it's really good to just do it all in one go. So that way, when you do need it, all you really have to do is pop it out of the container and throw it into your bowl here. So this is a really nice handy tool. It just makes those carrots really small here. And I do recommend making them nice and fine instead of throwing chunks of carrot, just for ease on the chewing there. All right, so that's probably good for my carrot. And then I have some green onion just for some extra flavor, a little bit. The funny thing is we're almost done making this meal. That's how fast and easy it is. So that's all done. And then I have my mango. Again, with the mango, it's good to consider that, yes, this is a fruit and it adds some nice fiber, it adds some vitamins and minerals servings. So if you are having like a really hard training day, maybe you can do your rice just as is, but you know that you're getting a good concentrated carbohydrate from fruit like mango or pineapple. Anything of the sort is actually going to help boost that energy of our meal just a little bit more to help with our training. So with that one, I'm just going to, this is how I like to do my mangoes. And same with if you're using an avocado, keep it in the peel here and then be careful. Make sure you're lightly slicing it, but I just slice it nice and thinly and then slice it again the other way. So then you create these little slits. Okay, so if you pop it out, it's just like that. And then what I do is I just squeeze that into my bowl straight from the peel. So just like so, I'm just squeezing that peel out. And then that gives me some nice mango there. Okay, so then now that I have my rice, I'm just gonna start adding all of these different vegetables onto my plate here. So I already added the mango. Now I'm adding the cucumber. Now I'm adding the carrot on this side. And I did mention that I was making a little game, a homemade game. Now I really wanted to share this recipe with you just because it's so simple. I do recommend trying to use kale if you can. I have spinach just because I have so much of it. But the reason being is calcium is actually a really important nutrient for athletes. So you don't only get that from dairy products, which is really neat. So kale is a really calcium rich vegetable, as well as something called tahini. So tahini is a sesame seed ground up into a butter. And this is a really calcium rich addition to this meal. So if you take kale and tahini, that would be great, but I'm also just using spinach today. So I'm gonna bring you over to my other part of the kitchen. So I have my pan here. What I'm gonna do is just put that on medium-high heat. I'll place you right there. Okay, and then I'm going to take my spinach. And if you've cooked with spinach before, you will know that this wilts really fast. So you don't need to just put a little handful. You can go all in and put a nice big handful in, because that will wilt right down. Okay, so I have that on the pan now. If you want some extra moisture to help make it wilt a little bit faster, all you need to do is add like a nice splash of water on there. But the components that you need for this calcium-rich game is that tahini, some hot sauce, I'm just using sriracha, and I also have soy sauce or tamari if it's gluten-free. And the last thing is a little touch of maple syrup. So I have my spinach here, adding a little bit of splash of water to wilt it down. So I'm taking this little jar, making a really nice simple sauce, which is delicious to even just do on its own and pour over the poke bowl, even if you don't want to add the spinach or kale or whatever you're using. You're just grabbing roughly a tablespoon of tahini in there like so. Got your soy sauce or your tamari. I just eyeball it. I just do a nice little splash, so maybe around a tablespoon or so. Then again, a little bit of hot sauce. So I'm going to be getting a good squirt of that in there. And then you're going to use a touch of maple syrup. I just left mine in the kitchen. Perfect. So I have my maple syrup here. And again, just a little splash. Right there. Good. And then I'm going to give that a good stir and make sure I blend it really well. And then I'm going to add a little splash of water to thin out the sauce. So once my spinach starts to wilt a little bit more, all I'm gonna do is pour this really easy sauce on top, stir it around and let it mix all together. And there you have it, a nice, really simple, easy spinach game. So this is cooking. I'll give that a good stir. Basically, all of my components of my meal right now are done. I'm gonna add that like green onion here. My tofu is almost ready. Once that tofu is ready, today I chose a nice sweet chili sauce. When it comes to condiments as well, depending on what you're using, you may want to go a little bit lighter with them or a little bit heavier. So this one specifically is carbohydrate rich. So I'm going to try to stick to just a tablespoon. But again, if it's a hard training session and you're really wanting a little bit more energy in your meal, go a little bit heavier on the condiments. You may need that extra little amount of carbohydrate. You can add it onto your protein, but you can also drizzle it overall on top of your bowl there. So my tofu is completed. My air fryer made it nice and crispy. I don't know if you can really tell, but it's nice and crispy. So what I'm gonna do next, I'm adding it in that same container that I added the cornstarch in. Okay. I wonder if you can hear the crispiness when I pour it back in there. Okay, so now it's in the container. All I'm gonna do is take my sauce of choice. And again, if you don't want sauce, you don't have to use it, but it adds a really nice flavor. And it doesn't have to be sweet chili. It can be anything you'd like. And I just like to pour a nice little drizzle on mine. Okay, and then you grab the lid, put it on top. And there you have it. Some nice sweet chili tofu. It's nice and crispy too. Okay, so I'm just gonna add that to my bowl there. All right. As you can probably see in the very back, my spinach is going down. So now I'm going to take that sauce, pour it on top of my spinach there, give it a good stir, just until it's all coated nice and even. Oh, it smells so good. Okay, and I'll show you what this kind of looks like here. So as you can see, it's kind of wilting down a little bit. The sauce, if your sauce is a little bit runnier, you can leave it on the stove top there to have it evaporate a little bit more. But I personally like mine as a little bit extra sauce. And then all I'm gonna do is add that onto my plate. Let me just make enough room. I'll show you my plate right after. It's just, I wish I had like 4 hands sometimes. All right, pouring that right on. Good. And that is my poke bowl. I'm gonna top mine off with a couple little extra fun things. So I love hot sauce. I'm gonna add a little hot sauce across the top. And then because I found this in a local food market, there's lots of different Asian cuisine and different side shops too. And it's basically like a rice seasoning. So it's some seaweed. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of seaweed on top and with some sesame seeds. And there we have my beautiful poke bowl. I should have timed myself. That was probably the fastest I've ever done it. So we have our protein, kind of a quarter of that plate. Again, remember, it's quite a rough estimate. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then we have lots of different vegetables on top. It's probably around that third of a plate. And then, you know, my rice is just underneath. Another thing that I haven't really put a lot of emphasis on, but is very important, is making sure we're adding a little bit of healthy fats in our meal. This is for a lot of different reasons. Fats play so many different roles in our body, but it's crucial for athletes to incorporate. So we got healthy fats from that tahini sauce, but in another really great way is maybe adding on some seeds, or you can make like a peanut butter sauce. Instead of that tahini, you can sub in like a nice peanut butter or any type of nut butter of choice. You can also add on hemp hearts, anything like that. You can even cook using olive oil or any type of oil that you enjoy. And that is a nice, healthy poke bowl. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. This one's my favorite meal. I've been making this once to twice a day sometimes, just because it's so easy. And now that brings me to our second recipe. And if anyone has any questions, you can just let me know. Perfect. Okay, nothing so far. So this next recipe is the protein one, and this one's super simple. It's one of those ones that you can prepare 20 to like 30 energy bites all in one go. So I'm just going to start that now. So I have the recipe right in front of me. Okay, so what you're gonna need, big bowl, okay, for mixing. You're gonna need maple syrup or like honey or any kind of sticky sweetener. a nut butter. I chose peanut butter. I have mini chocolate chips. Again, these are optional, but very highly recommended. And then I have quick oats. Oatmeal is such a nice, cheap, and healthy way to get some good carbohydrates in. I got a little bit of sea salt, and I have my protein supplement here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in our nut butter. So I have all of my measuring cups here. I'm using a cup and a half. So taking my nut butter and then pouring that into my cup measure. And this is like a 1 bowl thing. It's a no bake thing. It's so simple to make. If you're ever struggling with something that maybe you're not good at cooking or baking and you want to make sure that you're still getting in something healthy and nutritious, homemade, this might be like the perfect thing for you. Okay, so that is 1 cup, and then I'm just going to roughly go and eyeball it. That's the other beauty of this one is you can just eyeball everything. Okay, so that's roughly half of that cup measure there. Pour that into my bowl. Okay, so now I got that all good to go. Second thing is the maple syrup. So I'm going to take my maple syrup, and again, I'm just going to eyeball it because I was just using a nice dirty one, so why not just use it again? We need half a cup of our sticky sweetener. So this can be honey, maple syrup, any sort of thing like agave, anything that's sticky and runny. You don't want to sub this for like, say, a dry sugar, like brown sugar, anything like that, because that maple syrup is crucial for the liquid component of it. Okay, so once we have that in there, I just want you guys to give it a good stir, make sure that everything is evenly combined here. And this would be a great opportunity, just add a little sprinkle of salt. I feel like a witch with a cauldron right now. Okay, the next thing we're doing is adding a half a cup of our protein supplement. So 1 scoop typically of protein supplements is roughly 2 tablespoons. So I'm going to do 1 there. So that's 2 tablespoons. 4 tablespoons is equal to a 1/4 cup. And so since we need half a cup, I'm just going to do that twice more. Again, you can play around with it. Like if you only want to add in 2 scoops of protein powder, go for that. And then just add in more oats if you want to balance out that dry ingredients to liquid ingredients. So now I have my protein in there. I'll bring this camera down a little bit more. I'm just going to start folding this in with my spatula. Another really great way to like change up the flavor profile of this is, again, first changing that nut and seed butter by changing to like almond butter or pumpkin seed butter, sesame seed butter. It really does change the flavor. You can also choose like a chocolate protein powder and make it all chocolatey. You can sub out a little bit of protein powder and add in some cocoa. You can add in cinnamon. There's so many different things you can do here. All right. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to incorporate because you're really going to have to like work it in. Sometimes you can really just use your hands and fingers. It makes it a lot easier. But once you have like a rough mixture here, you can now probably add in your oats. So I'm using 1 1/3 cups of oats. So grab my 1/3 cup measure. We have this really nice store in Vancouver called No Frills, and I got this full bag of oats for $2. It was just crazy. Oats are such a great thing to add to your diet. So there's 1/3 cup, there's 2/3. I'm going to start off with just a cup right now and see how that works out, but I might use that last 1/3 cup. And this is kind of when you need to start like using your hands. So again, really important that your hands are clean. I'm going to put my spatula to the side and start using my hands. But before I do that, I'm going to add in my mini chocolate chips. I like to just add in the mini ones because there's more to go around. So just 1/4 there. All right, now time to get a little bit dirty. So you can set your spatula on the side here. Okay, and you're going to start taking your hands and really working in the protein powder, the oats into that dry mixture and giving it a good squeeze and really incorporating that all together. If you find that your mixture is too dry, that's when you can just add in a splash of milk, like soy milk, regular milk, or any type of liquid. It could even be water. Or if you find that it's a little bit too wet, that's when you can add in more dry ingredients. So either more protein powder or more oats. You can also play around with this one. If you want to add in more omega-3 or more healthy fats, you can add in chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp hearts, and like that. Okay, so they're looking absolutely delicious and great. You want the dough to be, so when you squeeze it, it forms and doesn't fall apart, right? It's able to form that nice dough there. So I'm going to add in my last third cup of oats here now that everything's slightly incorporated. Okay, and then the next thing is just making the balls. So when it comes to making the balls, you can choose the size of them. Say if you're going on a trip and you know you want something, you only want to eat like 2 things, I would recommend just making a bigger ball. Or if you want to make them smaller and have a little bit more to chew onto, or that feeling of having more protein bites, you can do that as well. So I'm just going to roughly grab a little bit here. Okay, give it a good squeeze. You can use a measuring spoon, but I just wing it. And as you can see, it just forms really nicely. You're going to start rolling it, forming it, and making little balls like that. So these are great to store in the fridge. I would recommend you let them just sit in the fridge for a little bit just to make sure they form nice and solid, because right now they're a little bit warm and they can just fall apart. So just set them on your plate, let them sit, and that is a nice, easy snack there. Now, I'm not going to waste your time working through all of this. So that is pretty much the end of the workshop. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I also do have those review questions, but since we just covered all of that topic and all of that discussion in the first seminar, I just recommend that you go watch that one. And with that, I am done, because I know that Thorsten, you have somewhere to be at 12. So that's all I have today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. That felt like a really fast cooking show. Was that, did you learn a new recipe, or do you think you're going to try these at home?
I absolutely loved it. It was pretty cool for sure. The one question that I had was the measurements, or like when you, for the poke bowl, when you have what proteins do you put in, how much, and so on. I don't think you touched base fully on it, or maybe I missed it there. But just like, what would I put in there, for example? I mean, we talked about it last week.
Yes.
But especially like for me, it's like, oh, I like some more cucumber today, but then is that really a good thing or not? I think that's a good question for me.
Really great question, as I wipe off the oats on my face. That's a great question. So with the proteins, like I was kind of saying, is you can kind of look at either the nutrition label, or like what we mentioned in the past, is that rough guideline of what 20 grams of protein looks like. So remember that palm model. So if you look at your palm, the size and the thickness, that roughly, if you're using any type of meat or seafood, that's roughly going to be 20 grams of protein. So when you're building your poke bowl, you want to make sure, regardless of the training day, whether it's a rest day, moderate day, or a high intensity training day, you're always going to keep that protein consistent. So this depends on your size. So in the last seminar, I can't remember if I gave you numbers, but the rough numbers that you do want to follow, if you want to figure out your calculations for yourself, is 0.3 to 0.55 grams per kilogram in a meal. So that typically lies around 20 to 40 grams of protein, depending on the size of the athlete. So they can calculate their own. And then based off of that number, say if someone needs 30 grams of protein, what they can do is they know that the size of their palm is roughly 20, so that they can do that plus a half size of their palm, and then they can add that to their meal. Or again, if they wanted to add in like edamame with that extra 10 grams of protein right there, they can do a palm size of their meat serving and then add in a half a cup of edamame to reach that 30 grams at the very end. Yeah, but it's also important to consider that other components of the meal, like the spinach, the tahini, that does contribute small amounts of protein. So you're pretty much going to be okay by just incorporating a palm size amount of that protein there.
Cool. I think I need to ask that again at some point.
I know, I should just write that down next time.
Funny. The other thing what I really liked and I never thought of is like making little bags with all the ingredients in and freeze them. I freeze the bananas, but I never thought of, yeah, you can actually make little bags, Ziploc bags, and then have them ready and just throw them in a mixer, and then that's it, done. So that's
Definitely.
pretty,
And
I like that.
I think Costco, they sell smoothie packs like that, but you can just make your own homemade ones for so much cheaper. Like you can even throw in, say, if you're like you're an athlete's having creatine powder or protein powder, you could even like throw in the protein powder and everything that you're putting into that smoothie besides liquid right into a bag, dump it in, and it's good to go.
That is so cool. I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna do that from now on
Yeah,
for
I'm
sure.
glad.
Let me
Perfect.
check.
And
Yeah,
were there
go
any
ahead.
other questions at all?
Yeah, I'm just gonna look. There's nothing on Facebook. Oh, there's another comment. Let's check this out. No, all good there. And any questions here in the webinar? Let's give it another few seconds.
Yeah, and I would honestly love to do more of these. Like it was quite fun. So if you ever wanted to set up a seminar or another workshop with me, for anyone who's watching, we can focus on like a certain type of subject, like that pre-workout or post-workout or competition days and things like that. It's always fun to just learn more recipes and learn from one another. So yeah, I would love to do more in the future.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
just
and I
having my
actually,
hands rested in here.
oh yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you're gonna do with our kids in preparation for the Activator Games and the Canada Games too, and that would be fantastic to see. So yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
perfect.
thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and thank you, Rachelle. And I'm sure that we'll see you again sooner than later.
Yes, sounds excellent. Have a nice day, everyone.